What once was and what is today, and a lively discussion about what could be. All wrapped up in a 30-minute discussion we call Media Matters. Coming up.
From Trucking City headquarters and our mobile studios, deep in the heart of Trucking Today, a Media Matters podcast for truckers today. Talking news, your host, Boss Man.
Howdy ho, trucking champs. We are here again, once again, with another show for you guys. Today, more on trucking from a different perspective. We handpick select stories where the press is deficient, doesn't quite give us the credit we deserve, and we put them up here for you to learn, debate, and or prove them right. Prove them wrong or me right. I'll get this right one day. Either way, it makes for good entertainment and a hell of a fight. A debate forum for truckers and those in the industry. That's what we provide here. It's all about making trucking great again. Sit back, pick up your phone, get ready to dial in and your coffee, and let's begin. Today, more on unions. A story that just broke the headlines caught my attention.
We are diving into a hot topic that's been making waves in the trucking industry. As many of you know, a 4-year contract has been reached between the UAW and Daimler Truck North America, averting a potential strike at U.S. facilities. This deal covers approximately 7,400 workers at various Daimler North America facilities throughout the country.
More on that in just a moment. But first, a little bit of history. April 28, 1934, truck drivers organized a strike to demand better wages and work conditions, including higher pay, shorter working hours, and basically getting together to highlight the power of collective bargaining and action to advocate for the rights of drivers. This action today, looking back, is known as the Minneapolis Teamsters strike. Now you have a little bit of perspective on today in trucking history. So just a little bit of thought. Today's conversation, we're mainly going to highlight on union or not. What are we doing? Well, today we're diving into this topic because it's up there. We're making waves every so often. You hear Teamsters, you hear this, you hear that. As many of you know, that 4-year contract has been reached between the UAW and Daimler North, and it covers 7,400 workers at various North American facilities, raises more than 25% of the 25% on their salaries over the next 4 years, includes profit sharing, cost of living increases, and contracts, all in this contract for the first time, guarantees job security, and gives the company a basically good leg on a higher build rate for the company as a whole, and has a likelihood of attracting and retaining skilled workers for their company and an image for the trucking industry and other aspects too. So watching the progress and seeing all this goes on, I have to ask some really serious questions. I'm not one side or the other. I don't believe one side of the argument or the other. But you can't deny the fact that when people in mass come together and they begin to collectively head towards a goal that some improvement overall can be reached for the union it represents. I mean, what I'd like to look at today and what I'd like to focus today's debate on is what kind of an impact or perception can be had in the industry overall if, and I say if, more of the industry were to get together and become more unionized in thinking, and more of the independent drivers were to climb on with, let's get things done. Because, I mean, think about it. In times we've come together with, the Canadian border strike, with the strike in Washington, D.C., many, many protests at different locations. No one's really gained a whole lot of foothold. Yeah, we have a few here, a few there, things here, happenings there. Some make news, some don't. But what's really happening here? At the end of the day, rates are still low, contracts are still sporadic, spot rate don't exist. Things are just collectively all over the place. So now I bear the question, would the impact of and perception of the trucking industry change if we were to consider something like a union? Not ATA, not OIDA, but just a collective action in one direction to get things done. So let's bring on our usual panel. I've got a couple of guests and a couple of opinions. In the meantime, put in the chat your thoughts on the very topic I've raised. Stand by because it's about to get real. First of all, with us is a grumpy old man with, I'm sure, a very, very indifferent opinion. What say you on the whole topic of unions there, good old grumpy old trucker? What's your thoughts on the base question?
Well, as far as me knowing much about trucking unions, I don't know a whole lot. I'll be honest with that. But as far as the union itself, I've been, invited to be in some whenever I was working in warehouses and assembly plants. And there are some factors that are good about it, and there are others that are bad drawbacks that would probably make more of a problem than it's worth.
Mhm. By the way, this entire discussion is based on the article you see in front of you. It does highlight some of the benefits the UAW is getting from the deal, which has been now probably penciled in and fixing to set next year. Honestly, when it comes down to it, some people like it, some don't. Everybody's different. I'm not saying that the trucking industry needs to unionize. But one thing that really strikes me is that every single time, as collectively as a greater number of drivers come together for different causes, these issues wind up becoming fragmented, not only between the drivers themselves, but with the press at large. No one can seem to understand what exactly it is we need. No one gets it. So having said that, Frank, what would your thoughts be if there was a single entity or single group of people that would take the reins and say, maybe go to Washington and say, we need this? What would your thoughts be if someone did that?
Well, I believe that if we was able to get something like that together that would work and everybody would be with each other on the same page, it may work. But again, unions are very, very strange. Some work well, some belly flop. So, I mean, it's real touch and go on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, every day is different, especially when you're talking about the pros and cons of trying to introduce something into an industry that the industry itself isn't used to. But change is progress. That's the way I look at it. So on one side, you have people like I call them proponents. They argue that unionization could empower drivers, ensuring fair wages, improving work conditions, and maybe a stronger collective voice, as I mentioned a moment ago. But on the other side, you also have those people that are the skeptics. They raise concerns about potential implications for those that don't want to be part of that. Say the independent drivers, what I brought up earlier, the small carriers, the people that don't have, the big influences like the Warners, the JB Hunts, so, at some point we've got to reach a middle ground and figure out a way to speak for everyone. Now, maybe in this next conversation, we'll have a little bit of a different take. I'm not sure, but I would likely welcome a guest that probably can bridge the gap between the good and the bad. So I'm going to bring on a newer guest right now and see if he is somewhat prepared to kind of bridge the gap between what you say, Frank, and what I say. He's a fellow that's been following us throughout the time and has been on as a commenter. So I'd like to welcome to the show Midlife Trucker. If you're ready to go, I'm going to bring you on board here and tell me what you think about the whole idea of bridging the gap between possible union and maybe not so much. Welcome to Tom, Midlife Trucker. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hello, how are you guys doing tonight?
Great. Glad you could come aboard.
Now that the preliminaries out of the way, truckers are a very independent breed. We don't like people telling us what to do.
Mm-hmm.
We like things to be on our own. So are a bunch of truckers going to join together into a union, pay dues, and have to do what the majority decides to do? Because whether you want to or not, if you're in a union and the majority votes that we're all going to take a rate of $1.50, we're all taking a rate of $1.50. We're all going to wear blue shirts if they say we're wearing blue shirts.
Exactly. Yeah.
We'll all be speaking Punjab if that's what the majority of the union says.
Good point. And honestly, I didn't really think of it in that perspective. I mean, technical difficulties. Trying to do the B-roll as we're talking because we've got screens all over the place. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And my thing is I wasn't really looking at it from the perspective of paying dues or any of that. My thing is, and the reason I bring it up is because the amount of times in history we've seen people go through, oh, let's protest, let's change, let's be the voice. No one's actually been able to collectively get that many people together in one room and get done what needs to be done. So, maybe something like a union would work, but not such that people are required to pay in and toe the line. Just enough to get people in the same page and in the same room about the same set of circumstances. What say you, Tom?
That's kind of sounds like lobbyists more than union, because, you have to fund a union. And for a protest to be successful or any union to be successful, they have to have certain things. You have to have a clearly articulated grievance. You have to have a solution that you want, and you have to have a single spokesperson. And that's the only way it works. And that's something we never have in this industry. True.
And a lot of times maybe there are those skeptics on one side of the argument that say maybe that's part of the reason why things don't work the way they should. Think about it. Now, on what on what Tom is saying, Frank, if you knew someone like a Todd Spencer or a Chris Spears or someone elevated to their responsibility were capable of bridging the gap and say, making something positive happen, what would you think about someone like that actually representing you? Would you be willing to follow them in terms of conversation, or would you kind of shy away, or would you be like Tom and think, you know what, maybe not? It's just not the right way to go.
Like I said, I've been through the union phases, working at, warehouses and assembly plants. So after doing my research on any kind of union, I was like totally against it. So yeah, I guess I'd have to agree with Tom on this. It's not something that we want because they're going to push us. They're going to tell us what to do more or less. And then that gets old after a while because us drivers, it's bad enough we already get told what to do with our um, fleet managers and things, you know. So
Right. All right. Well, forgetting the obvious thing, Tom, you bring up a great point, by the way, my friend. I totally get where you're going, and you know, I kind of agree with you. But let's put all that aside for just a second. And if there were enough drivers that wanted to do something collectively, not union based, but just collectively to make a big enough difference, you know, what would be the thing that would need to be changed? How could we change the trucking industry if we were to come together? Could it be rates? Could it be regulations? What would benefit the most out of some sort of collective effort? Think about that. You know, because today we got a lot of people saying there's too many regulations. I'm one for saying that there's just way too much on us. We can't get things done. So, you know, there are others out there that say that, you know, the rates are too low. I mean, you name it, there's issues left, right, and sideways. So how do we get things done without there being a collective voice at the table and saying, hey, let's change this? What say you, Tom?
Problem is you go from one side to the other. You know, if you have a clearly listed demand, say that the rates are too low. Are you wanting the government to come in and mandate? Then we're asking for more government control. The problem we have is everybody and their brother thought it was a good idea to go buy a truck. And well, it wasn't a good idea for everybody to buy a truck.
Very true. Very true. That
And
these days is
unfortunately, some of them are going to have to fold.
Yep, and I'm sure that a majority of them already are. I mean, good Lord. I mean, look at the rates, not rates, but some of the market reports have already said, you know, just the company I work with in the last 3 months, we've gone from 9,600 BCOs with Landstar all the way down to 86. So the capacity's thinning and it's working. So to that degree, Tom, you are absolutely right. We have a new person leaving a comment. Elisha Moss, if I'm pronouncing the name right. There wouldn't be any trucks anywhere. The truckers would shut down for everything. Well, I mean, in a sense, you're right, but that's kind of one of the reasons why things are happening the way they are. I mean, every time, just what comes to mind is one particular protest Mother Trucker put up on his show almost a year ago. And a fellow was trying to organize a protest back heading from Philadelphia to Washington. And dude was hugely pissed. And I mean, humongously pissed at the fact that he'd sat there talking about it for 2 days and no one took any interest whatsoever. He traveled by himself all the way to Washington to do what he said he was going to do, but only had 2 trucks with him. But he claimed he was going to get 10,000. Now, I don't know if that was just blowhard, you know, BS on his part, or if that was just the simple fact that everybody just thought he was full of it. I don't know. But more to your point, Elisha, I mean, it's just there wouldn't be any trucks. If we can't make changes, there aren't going to be trucks anyway. I mean, you know, grant you, we're in the middle of a cycle. The cycle will work itself out. Everybody will be, you know, back. I mean, it was one thing in 2012. It's going to be still something, you know, next year. So I'm not saying doom and gloom, but you know, we do, I think, have to get our act together. That's my opinion. I think we do have to get our act together. We do have to think about the industry rather than letting the larger companies like the Warners and the Schneiders speak on our behalf and put rules and ethics in questions that we don't have any control over. What say you, Frank?
Real quick, I'll just say, I believe that's pronounced Elisha.
Maybe. Okay. I'm lousy with names. Sorry. But what say you about the whole idea of letting the larger companies speak on our behalf?
Well, they're pretty much taking over a lot of other companies, so you know it's liable to happen. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do about it if they do that. So
Yeah.
it
is what it is. I mean, you can't really match too much in with things out of your control. I know, but that's part of the reason why I'm bringing the question, because I mean, if unions can do it on their behalf, what can we do as a industry on our behalf? How can we affect change without that union question or without that union problem being part of it? I mean, large carriers, independent operators, what can we do to shift how things work and what weights put on what we do every day? Think about that. Tom, I'll leave that question to you first. I mean, what kind of dynamics can we change? What things can we do differently in the industry to address what I have here for the second question? What are your thoughts?
We'd have to have a list of what everybody wants changed.
Mhm.
You say you want the rates higher. Well, the
Mhm.
shippers don't want the rates higher. You know, so
Yeah, you're right.
and there's also a lot of people who have low cost operations and are able to run profitably right now. They don't want the
Mhm.
rates higher either. They want a lot of the capacity to leave the market.
True.
Um,
True.
you
I
know,
mean, you
so
gotta have your
getting
options
together,
open, obviously. Yeah.
coming up with a common goal or demand. The
Mhm.
Canadians had a common goal, and that
Mhm.
was the vaccine.
Right.
And it wasn't so much just the vaccine; it was the fact that they had to be quarantined when they came back from the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. Very annoying.
And as a result, they had a common goal. They had a spokesperson, and they were able to shut it down. The
Yes.
UAW on this Daimler, they had
Mhm.
Sean Fain. He was the only
Mhm.
spokesperson. Nobody else spoke. He was able to articulate the
Okay.
demands. Now, there's a negative side to this increase.
Mhm.
The truck prices are going up,
Uh-huh.
so
Okay.
it will get paid for.
Auto prices you're talking about, the cost of the vehicles we buy and all that. Is that, yeah, if
The
that's, yeah.
price of Freightliner trucks is going to go up,
Yep.
and
Yep.
and as well as parts.
Yep. Exactly. Trying to bring it up to let everybody know if you want to call into the show and be a part of the conversation, you are certainly welcome. 860-785-3547, 860-785-3547. Talking about unionization. Everybody's got a part in a part of this argument, and they've got an opinion. So I bring it up because UAW is making a lot of productive headlines with their fight and trying to make sure that their organization stays together. So my thing is, well, we've had enough in the trucking industry of the bittering back and forth. What would happen if we did something similar? And like you pointed out at the start of the show, Tom, yeah, there are some drawbacks. There are some negative potential drawbacks to what would happen if we did or were required to do something like that. I, for one, don't want to give up my independence or freedom. Put that right out there. I mean, I said, I always want to remain neutral, but I'm a truck driver. I don't like giving up my freedom. But that's one potential drawback. I mean, what would some others be that would potentially negatively affect us? Frank, what say you?
Well, just like we're talking here, if we had a group of drivers that come together that was willing to talk and help and bring up things and not charge fees and things like that, it may be possible for us all to have, kind of similar to what he was talking about, a lobbyist type thing.
Right.
Because, otherwise it's never going to work in our favor because it's going to cost us more in the long run. It's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we want but one thing. We want fairness, we want equity, we want equality, and we want to make sure that everybody's equally represented. Because right now, if you and I walk into Congress and we demand a change, we're going to be laughed at. And we're going to be told, you know what? See somebody, talk to somebody. We would wind up getting pushed toward the very lobbyists you were talking about here at the start of the show, Tom. And you know what? Sometimes you got to have a lobbyist in your corner. It may not be the best thing, but you know what? Without a union, that's your only option. What say you?
Well, lobbyists are one, possible aspect, but again, like I said, you got to look at everything. You got to look at the possible consequences.
Right.
Like New York, when they were talking about the possible shutdown of New York, not going there because of New York's unfair practices towards trucks.
Right.
The other thing you got to look at is what would the blowback be? if we were to shut down, say even 50% of the trucks going to New York City, and everybody got together and we were all solid and had a spokesperson, what would the blowback be? Would the people turn against us when their children started not getting formula, not getting diapers? When people go to the grocery store and it's bare and they couldn't get fuel for their cars if they had cars, then we start looking like the bad guys. And when you lose public opinion, if you remember the trucker strike in the 70s, what cost the truckers all of their goodwill with the people is when they started throwing cinder blocks off the highways because of the independent truck drivers. And they lost the goodwill with the people, and as a result, that strike went away very quickly.
Well, that plus law enforcement basically saying enough's enough because they couldn't follow it all. I mean, law enforcement
today's world,
usually
they got
owns somewhere.
cameras.
Yeah,
Today's world, they got cameras, and you'd be famous. We'd be
You're
on
right.
we'd be on somebody's shorts.
Yeah, literally. And trust me, to those that don't do trucking, we're not talking about the underwear shorts. We're talking about the public ones. Just saying. Larger carriers and independent operators could be obviously negatively affected based on what we're talking about. It's something we just pointed out. Kudos to you for mentioning that, Tom. But I mean, think about it. I mean, what other aspects would be negatively affected by not doing something? I mean, what happens on either side of this argument? We just talked about the fact we have to go to lobbyists to get anything done. We got to talk about, what the potential drawbacks. All right. So dovetailing off of that, think about it. If, let's say jobs were harder to find because of, there not being enough representation in the industry. You're currently looking for a position, Frank. If your position were hard to find or hard to be able to locate because of there not being the right representation, or maybe the wrong law was passed or some crazy reason. I mean, what would you think of in terms of this argument and how that affects you?
Well, I'd be one very grumpy old trucker for sure.
Well, you already are. But think about it.
Oh,
If
I'd
there's
be more.
but think about it. If there's some one person or entity that could affect you in a way that helps you work, which, not picking sides here, but if it helps you get the job you need and get where you need to go, such as what the UAW does for Chrysler. Whereas maybe now you're having difficulty, how tempted would you be to lean to that one side of one argument or the other? I mean, got to think about it. Your circumstances dictate your actions. So what say you?
Well, it'd be really touchy because I mean, whenever you're paying dues to these unions, it's a factor of it is, are they really going to help you, or are they there for themselves? That's the big picture I see in it. Because after researching unions for quite some time, I've discovered that most of them are in it for themselves. They don't care about actually the person themselves.
Right. Yeah. 9 times out of 10, that's usually the way that works. I mean, it is a fairly selfish circumstance. Sean O'Brien is a perfect example of that very setup you just put in play. I mean, I've never had nothing bad to say about him, but one thing's for sure. His bottom line's a hell of a lot better than the guys he represents. I guarantee you. That's all I'm saying. So in terms of the representation of an industry, if there was a way of putting at the top someone that could represent me without having that disconnect between what they have and what I have not, do you think that would actually honestly equal the playing field? What say you, Tom?
I don't. First, we have to have the exact problem that we want to address and who we want to fix it.
Uh-huh.
And that's the problem. We don't have a specific problem and who we want to fix it. There's a lot of different problems and a lot of different people have to fix them. Such as some things are fixed by the FMCSA, some things are fixed by the EPA, some things are fixed overall by the Department of Transportation. And all of these things have to be worked out to what the exact problem is. It's kind of like you don't eat the elephant all at one time. You're gonna have to do it bite by bite. So So what's the
Yeah.
first problem? How do you tackle it? And what do we want done?
Just like Brian Gilardo says, welcome to the show, my friend. I appreciate you sending a comment my way. He says, quit letting the FMCSA regulate its drivers anymore. And if we as drivers were totally union, if we were forced to be on strike, no stores or businesses would get their freight. Well, it's kind of opposite of what we're talking about here, but I clearly think I see his side of the argument anyway. I mean, I agree with him that FMCSA regulates the crap out of us. And I've said all along, without trucks, you get it yourself. I'm famous for that one. So, Brian, I appreciate that comment. You're definitely well received. Welcome to the channel. What say you on that, Frank?
Let's see.
Quit letting the FMCSA regulate us. What do you say on that?
Well, that was a subject I think we covered. What was it, Saturday? I believe it was it Friday. But anyhow, we just touched on that subject. You know, more rules on this is just going to make things worse as far as with the FMCSA goes. We already have too many as it is, and a lot of them, several drivers don't even understand because they're written so weird. So, yeah, I'm kind of with Brian on that. You know, that'd be nice if they would lighten up a little bit and quit throwing so many rules at us.
Yeah. Well, rules.
Is there a particular rule?
Right? What is that? Rule you got? Particular rule you got in mind, Frank?
A particular rule? There's too many of them to think of right now. I'm sorry.
I can always change the schedule, my friend. We have this open for debate, so it's no time like the present. Look, it's clear the question. It's clear the question of unionization in the trucking industry is a complex and multifaceted discussion. We're not going to solve it in one discussion. Arguments from both sides, each offering insights as to the potential impact. The decision rests in the hands of people that are paid a hell of a lot more than we are and really can't involve us in what happens. We have our chance, we have our choice. Whether unionization is our path to either pure chaos or better days, one thing's for sure, the American dream, it isn't for sale. We keep the shelves stocked. We are the ones that make it possible, day in and day out. So until things change, we have to deal with what we're given. One day at a time, 1 mile at a time. It's the trucks that make the deliveries, but it's you and you alone that make the industry thrive. So until next time, my friends, keep it real, keep the faith, and keep her rolling.